Hello, Louie. How are you?
Well, I think I'm doing all right, but I'm not sure I'm going to make sense. It didn't seem like I did last night before the Rules Committee, but sure trying.
Louie, you have done something that I just think is remarkable. Yesterday, when we first talked about this, I thought what you were saying was, I can't do this anymore. You don't go this way. I can't do this anymore. You're saying you'll give up your position because you know that the GOP hates you. And so
leadership, I got a lot of friends, but
no, you have a lot of
would rather
friends.
I was gone.
Sure. They would. So, I mean, there would be tons that would volunteer to be your pallbearer, not necessarily to hang out with you. But you actually said, I'll leave. I won't run again for Congress if you will do the right thing on this.
That's right.
That's really amazing.
If you don't do the right thing, I'm running again, and although I have voted against the speaker a couple of times and tried to get somebody else in as speaker, now I'm saying if you don't do the right thing, not only am I going to run again, but it will be my number one goal every day to try to work to get completely new leadership in our positions of leader in our party, because this is so outrageous. And Glenn, I got back Thursday night from Egypt, and I'd met with some of their top people. I've met with Sisi a number of times, the president, former general. There are so many wonderful people, but people there, people I've met with in the UAE, people I've met with in Lebanon, and some of the decent people in Libya, not to mention Israel. And I believe all of the leaders of each of the parties in Israel even agree. This is a terrible deal, but it is a treaty. And all we have to do is treat it as the treaty it is, and then the Senate will not get two-thirds votes to ratify it, and it's ineffective against the United States.
Okay, now hang on just a second. But didn't the Republicans do something to give it this status?
Yes, it was called the Corker-Cardin bill, and people in both parties voted for it. And as you know, I mean, I think it was only one senator voted against it in the Senate. But in fairness to them, completely fair here, everybody that voted for it relied on the president and Secretary Kerry and all of their promises that this was not a treaty. Kerry himself said, and as a quote, he said it was a non-binding agreement that he was negotiating. So if it's non-binding, if it's an executive agreement, and any president can just stop it at will, then that doesn't require Senate ratification. But I've heard you talk about, that a Senate vote on ratification, two-thirds, is required when an agreement affects other treaties, changes other treaties like this one does, is an agreement regarding arms, is binding, all of the things that this deal is.
So they passed that bill. Now you're saying you got to reverse yourself on this. Do you have anybody anybody who's willing to do that?
I've had a number of people that say, you're right, I voted for the Corker bill, but this is a treaty, sure enough. We don't get a say in it. So the only vote we ought to take in the House is to call it what it is. This is a treaty. So Senate, it's up to you to have a vote on ratification. But I heard last night at the Rules Committee, the comment was made in questioning of the chairman of the committee before me. He testified before me. Somebody said, why shouldn't we treat it like a treaty that it appears to be? And the answer was, well, gee, the president's already indicated that if we try that and try to treat it as a treaty, then he will just veto the measure. But Glenn, then I brought up later when I testified that if we treat it as a treaty, the president doesn't get to veto it. And I know some have said, well, under Senate rules, the president needs to submit it to the Senate as a treaty and then we take a vote on ratification. That may be under Senate rules, but those are amended, modified, suspended constantly. They regularly do that, and there's no problem with doing that. And having talked to different constitutional professors, and you know so many, you can check yourself, but they say, you know what, if the Senate says this is a treaty and they themselves call for a vote on ratification and they don't get 2/3 to ratify it, then that treaty is not binding
Louie,
on the U.S.
what is really going?
It's not enforceable.
Can I ask you what's really going on? Because everybody in the GOP is wearing their mother's underpants. All of them are wearing either little girl brownie underpants or their grandmother's underpants, but they're not stepping up and being men at all. What is really going on? Why is this?
I wanted to know the same thing, Glenn, and of course leadership are not going to tell me, but I had some of my staff checking with some of the leadership staff, and off the record, behind the scenes, they were told, look, we think that Iran's going to get nuclear weapons no matter what happens. So if we treat this as a treaty and it doesn't get the 2/3 vote, which it would, then when Iran gets nukes, then we'll all be blamed as Republicans.
Oh, good God.
We didn't approve the treaty that would have stopped it. But if we just act like we're fighting as hard as we can to stop it and don't treat it as a treaty, and we both in the House and Senate vote to disapprove it, but the president vetoes it and goes ahead, then when Iran gets nukes, we can all blame the president and the Democrats. And that makes me sick. I don't care which party gets the blame. Iran needs to be stopped.
So we're going to give them $1.5 billion. Give them $1.5 billion so they can run.
$150 billion.
Sorry, $150 billion.
See, we already gave them nearly $7 billion this year just to stay at the table and negotiate with us. We found that out this summer, and then we also found out that
I didn't know that.
that South Africa transferred 13 metric tons of pure gold to Iran, and the administration here, the Obama administration, won't confirm that they gave the okay, but a lot of other countries said, South Africa wouldn't transfer pure gold to Iran unless the U.S. had said it was okay, but the administration won't confirm that. So the money's been flowing into Iran. And you also know, you've covered it, you've talked about it, that Iran is the biggest supporter of terrorism. They've funded so many of our Americans being killed and IEDs that have maimed so many of our people that you're trying to help as wounded warriors. Why in the world would we give them $150 billion? How about if we took a different tack and we said, hey, this $150 billion that we're holding, if you don't stop your nuclear production, we're going to give it to all your enemies and let them arm. How's that sound?
Louie, what is the best case scenario of what's happening at the mall today? What's happening on the Capitol? What?
I'm so grateful you're coming, because the best case scenario, and by the way, I didn't have a good feeling about Rules Committee and what they're going to do, because they end up voting a majority. You normally vote with however the speaker wants them to, but the vote, they're talking about not having this vote until Friday, 9/11.
That's September 11th.
Unbelievable. But the goal of the gathering is to wake up the members of the House and Senate, saying this is a treaty. You treat it like a treaty. And if you don't, you see all the thousands and thousands that are out here, we are all going to mobilize and work against you. We'll walk blocks. We'll make phone calls. We'll contribute. We will see that you don't stay in the Senate or you don't stay in the House if you don't treat this as a treaty and refuse to ratify it. And that's possible, Glenn. If it weren't, you and I wouldn't keep trying. Right?
Well, I don't know. I almost left the studio here while you were talking because I was giving up so much. So, Louie, I will see you later today, my friend, and I thank you. I thank you so much for everything that you have done and are continuing to do. Can you just give me one quick check on this, because we went back and forth on this? Does this treaty hold us to defending Iran and these nuclear power plants if anyone, a.k.a. Israel, decides to go after them?
We would be, if it were ratified, we would be compelled under the agreement to defend the terms of the treaty, which would mean they get to develop nuclear activity for peaceful purposes, and we would have to help defend them doing that. And that would be the worst of all worlds if we just blatantly. We know the administration and President Obama hates Netanyahu and so many others in Israel, but this would actually be the United States going to war, committing acts of war against Israel. But don't forget, he is basically giving winks and nods along those lines. He'd said something previously that, if the planes were not shot down by us, something along those lines, if Israel goes and we don't shoot them down. He's telling Israel all along, we may have to defend this treaty with Iran. We should not affirm it. Should not ratify it.
I will see you later. Thank you very much, and God bless you and everything that you do.
God bless you, Glenn.